All right. Welcome back to the Spatial Show. My name is Vladimir Bosanac. I am one of the co hosts here, and during the day, also the co founder and publisher of The Registry, a West Coast commercial real estate news organization.
And I am Elliot Golan, the other and far less interesting co host of The Spatial Show. By day, I am a senior vice president and one of the leaders of the dedicated real estate practice at Allison, a global marketing, communications, PR consultancy, all those fancy words.
Elliot, don't sell yourself short. I think that beard can tell a story.
It can, and I can tell you a funny story. I know we normally talk about real estate, but I figure this stuff is really interesting to people. I have shaved twice in the last, I want to say 15 or 20 years. And the very
Okay.
first time I did it, I walked out of the bathroom. My girlfriend at the time, now wife, looks at me and says, "Never again."
All right.
Yes, yes, yes. The genetics of jawline passed by this house.
Interesting. All right. Well, you certainly got in line twice for the facial hair, so that's
That's right. That's right.
that's one positive way to look at it. So, before we get into our conversation today, I do want to just highlight really quickly. We have an interview coming up after Elliot and I finish our banter back and forth with Andrew Thomas. Andrew is the CEO of Downtown Santa Monica Inc., which is effectively the kind of a business district association for the city of Santa Monica. Interesting conversation. Obviously, Santa Monica is right next door to Pacific Palisades. They have not had nearly as much of a direct impact as the Pacific Palisades has with the fires in January. However, downtown Santa Monica as a retail destination for that sort of geography has experienced quite a lot of things. So we talked to Andrew about some of the stuff that they're dealing with, but also how they're trying to cope with resiliency in general, and also how downtown Santa Monica as a city is looking at its future, right? What this organization does, and it's an interesting conversation.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Santa Monica is, even for those not within LA proper, sort of understand that it's kind of an ocean side, and Pacific Palisades is right there. So, super timely conversation. Obviously, there's much more than real estate that goes into this whole story. Um, but as with everything in our industry, people need to kind of accept and understand that the physical world, the one in which we inhabit, is real estate.
Yep. Yeah. Hence the name of the show, the Spatial Show.
That's right. We
It's all
exist in
about the
space.
space and
That's right.
everything that occupies it. So, Elliot, for this week, we're doing a little bit of a new segment here. We're going to talk about a few kind of interesting things that we've seen in the news. You want to kick us off with that conversation?
Yeah, it just occurred to me, funny enough, less than, I don't know, a week, maybe 2 weeks max ago, that next month, March, represents 5 years since, COVID-19 ostensibly shut down the world and fundamentally changed our industry forever. You know, we could argue multiple asset classes, but none more extreme than the office market. It's sort of my contention, and it has been, that there are two eras of commercial office, before COVID and after.
The BC and the AC now stands for that, right?
Exactly, exactly. And, it's just a different physical world, especially in commercial
Yeah.
office. Other things, I feel like it just sort of sped up, right? The whole Amazon retail thing was already a big deal in 19. Obviously, foot traffic falling certainly exacerbated that, and restaurants. And I know we're going to talk about some of this later on, but like the Uber Eats of the world were already starting to damage restaurants. And then COVID, kind of in a lot of ways, just acted as this little nudging of trends that were happening in our industry regardless.
Yeah, and probably a little bit more than a nudge. I mean, it definitely sort of took whatever were some of the emerging trends at that point in time 5 years ago and sort of accelerated a lot of them to basically what they are today, new norms, right? Interestingly enough, I remember us, organizing a conference, an industry conference in San Francisco in March of 2020, and I was with family at a volleyball tournament. And when we received the email from the city of San Francisco to shelter in place, and so obviously the event was canceled.
Sure.
The event business, I think, was profoundly changed very quickly following March of 2020. We ended up hosting our event virtually, and we learned how to do that. And it's interesting, kind of as we say, what are some of the norms these days? I mean, I think this software that we're using to record our podcast did not exist 5 years ago, and
Right.
here we are. This is sort of a new thing. And interestingly, like I remember in 2019 or maybe 2018, I remember having a conversation with the CEO of an architecture firm that everybody probably knows. But he insisted on having a call, be a conference call, be a video call. And I remember that being relatively strange.
Yeah.
He was so like adamant that this is how we're going to have our conversation, and we were fine with it. But it was interesting, obviously, early on. He was certainly one of the pioneers in this space, and now it's really a norm, right?
Yeah, absolutely. All of our meetings, obviously, most of them are virtual at this point. But more importantly, it's not a phone call, it's not a conference call, it's not, dialing into something. It's on your laptop and it's on
Right,
camera.
right.
Um, so yeah, a complete changing of the guard. So something else on my mind this week, and I really wanted to get your take as someone who lives in a gateway city where things are expensive. So a property in New York, 590 Madison, some of our audience will have read about it by the time they hear this, has hit the market with a price tag of 1.1 billion. And just in the last breath, as we talked about how office has fundamentally changed, we see a big ticket item hit the streets, and it's been almost 2 years since something sold over the billion mark in New York, the most expensive city in the world. Does
And
this
maybe anywhere else in the country, if I'm not mistaken.
good chance?
Yeah, I don't know. I should have probably done a little bit of research on this. I don't think anything has sold over $1 billion. I think close to it, if I remember, maybe the Transamerica building in San Francisco,
Right.
but I think it was more in the sort of 7 to 600 million. Someone, I'm sure, will correct me as they look at this, but it is an interesting thing that we have a trophy asset in a major city, top five city in the world, hitting the market. What are some of the things that you found out about it, Elliot?
I mean, I think the big thing here is that it's owned by a pension fund, which, as you know, pension funds are all about return on investments. They're not looking just at cash flow. So what to me, what it suggests, and the most interesting part of this is someone had to tell them there's an appetite for someone to spend $1 billion on a Class A office building in a major metropolitan area. And if you ask me, even last week, what's the appetite to spend $1 billion on a commercial office? I would have guessed somewhere between 0 and 1%. I just didn't think there was an appetite for that, and maybe they're wrong, right? Maybe they price this and it's going to sit on the market for 9 years, but I don't know.
Having said that, Elliot, there were a couple of transactions. Actually, I believe the Norwegian pension fund just in the
Right?
last month entered the U.S. market or re-entered the U.S. market and bought a portfolio of sort of assets, several $1 billion. Some on the East Coast, some on the West Coast also. So clearly, there is, I think, some appetite for certain types of properties,
Yeah.
especially if they're trophy assets. I don't know what the occupancy of this building is, but I imagine that will drive its valuation quite significantly. And also, there's probably only maybe a handful of companies, entities that can put this kind of money. And so my guess is I wouldn't be surprised if there was some kind of discussions already happening.
Right.
And this, gave the owners sort of enough confidence to say, hey, maybe we should try to market it and just sort of test the market and see how it goes. How much do you know about its occupancy and some of the tenants? Where their rents might be, kind of in terms of market rates.
I read online it's somewhere in the 80% realm, which, for office is typically considered good in the good times and the bad times, right? I mean, you never
That
really
is,
expect much
yeah,
really. Yeah.
is very
Uh,
good for a trophy asset. Yeah,
Tenants are strong. It's classic the fire tenants that dominate the eastern seaboard, if you will. So for all intents and purposes, among commercial office, it is probably a safer bet for the type of buyer that would be looking at this. And to your point, once we cross a certain threshold financially, we're looking at mostly sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, and a handful of sort of private equity and or management
yeah,
firms. Your Invesco's, your Pru, your Blackstone. But other than those, you're looking, yeah, I mean, you're looking at pension funds and sovereign wealth funds.
yeah. That is most likely. And again, you will probably get it at a discount what a building like this traded 5 years ago.
Oh,
So
sure.
it might be one of these things where somebody definitely wants to play in the New York market. This is a great way for them to sort of put some of the money that they've been the dry powder, as they say, has been
Yes.
sitting on the sidelines for quite a bit. So that is interesting.
Yeah, and
Um,
speaking of the $1 billion thing, because that's obviously such a significant money bit of money, we're going to talk about CMBS more in a little bit. But Willis Tower, formerly Sears Tower, one of the most famous office buildings in the world, whether or not you like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, um, just got an extension, 1.3 billion CMBS loan. So we're seeing big dollar signs start to appear again. And as someone that is kind of the antithesis of the extend and pretend that our industry is known for, I consider myself pretty realistic and often harsh. These can't be bad signs.
I don't think so. I think we're definitely entering the phase of recovering transactions. Some of these trades are not going to happen at the numbers that they would have happened even a couple of years ago. Definitely not at the numbers before the interest rates started going up.
Sure.
It is, it does seem like transactionally things are starting to move. Um, Again, not at the levels that people or the sellers would like them to, but it does seem that across the markets, at least that where we're following, if there is distressed debt, some of those lenders are figuring out that maybe the time has come to try to figure something out. Um, on the whole, what we have seen is that lenders are not necessarily looking to take over properties. They are looking to kind of, as you said, extend and pretend. But I think that has its sort of time and limit as well. And maybe there is enough of a story behind return to office. Certainly in markets like New York and in the Midwest, I think the return to office numbers are quite better, higher than maybe where there are, in San Francisco where we are, or even in Seattle where you are, right? So things are starting to move. We mentioned in our last week's show, there's still a lot of uncertainty in the market, and this
Yeah.
industry does not like uncertainty. So we'll see. We'll see what this does. What happens to interest rates and kind of how it all plays itself out. But it does seem 25 will be a year of much higher number of transactions.
Yeah. Yeah. I expect volume to go up. Maybe not at the pace, well, surely not at the pace everyone wants it to, but we will at least see the first positive year in a couple, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Elliot, one story that caught my attention, and this has been a story that's been around, for a little while, but there have been a couple of, store closings, like Safeways closings, in the Bay Area and Northern California. And this is not necessarily a story that's isolated just in this region. I have noticed similar stories in other parts of the country too.
Yeah.
One of the biggest drivers, at least according to companies that are closing them, is safety. And it kind of made me think about all these, cabinets that are now
Yeah.
in supermarkets and convenience stores, that are beginning to show, that they have a very negative effect on
Yeah.
on shoppers. They're actually pushing people away from buying things, and I wonder if it's a bit of a self fulfilling prophecy here, where they're claiming that safety is sort of the reason that the stores are getting closed, but at the same time, are they hiding other sort of challenging issues with their retail environment in general. Retail overall has done relatively well, specifically in the suburbs.
Yeah.
It tends to be that centers with supermarket kind of anchors tend to do relatively well. But I am curious what you think about this.
Um, Listen, it's human nature, both in sort of our day to day lives and relationships, certainly in politics, and business and real estate is no different, to find something to blame. And
Yeah,
that is, I think that's precisely what is happening here. Because if you look at the data, and we'll use San Francisco since you brought it up, and it kind of is the poster child for this whole like everyone's stealing everything thing that kind of has been the narrative now for a few years. Property crime is down. Period. Historic lows. The data's there. So if property crime is down, how can you credit theft for a reason for closing? Those two things can't exist. And I think what
right,
we're doing is, as retailers, no, no, no. It's not because our business isn't sound. It's not because what we sell doesn't have demand. Trust me, Barnes and Noble is at the back of the room saying, "Hold my beer." Um, it's simply theft. It's something out of our control. We did nothing wrong. I think that's what's happening here.
right, right. And it's almost pushing the blame to the municipalities and the police departments
Right.
of these cities, right, and counties. They're not doing enough to protect us. It seems a little rich. Obviously, every location could have some instances of these things happening. It's hard to sort of make a conclusion based on what everybody's experiencing across the country. It just seems like an overused excuse.
Yeah.
And you live in Seattle, I live in the Bay Area. Sure, there's crime, big cities like every other big city. um, I don't necessarily feel unsafe walking into a Safeway.
Yeah.
So maybe I go to fancy Safeways. I don't know. Maybe you do too, Elliot. So we don't see it. I have seen in our Target stores. I have seen these cabinets.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't remember that it sort of caused me to not buy something, but it certainly looks kind of awkward. I have to look for somebody to help me open it. And
Absolutely.
it's for stuff like, shaving cream and things. It's not, I don't know that those are necessarily high end items. Right. So it is, I don't know. It's just one of these things that caught my eye, and I'm curious if, 18 months from now, 12 months from now, we're going to see some reports, showcasing, Amazon and Temu really taking over
And
most
that's
of
what's
most
actually
of our
happening.
most of our shopping habits. And I bet you that probably is one of the bigger reasons that's just maybe hasn't been uncovered yet. Right.
Well, and I think there's a psychological fallacy here. The entire concept of deterrence, which these cabinets is what you're talking about, right? I mean, the theory here is we're deterring theft. You can't isolate what you're deterring. What you're deterring is access. And it could be access from someone who plans to pay full price and has no issues. And it's deterring access or limiting access to someone who plans to steal it. We are the same as it relates to, the consumer. We are being provided with limited access. And I can tell you, as someone who is seemingly always behind schedule, um, yeah, when I have to run around a Safeway for 10 minutes trying to find one of the 4 employees because the company doesn't employ enough so they can save on overhead, um, I'm likely just to walk away and say, "Man, I can order this thing." And Amazon, I live near a major metropolitan city. They'll have it here today or tomorrow.
Well, and Elliot, I think you and a lot of people are just looking at some numbers that I've dug up. So this is basically basic research sort of showing that 24 versus 23 e-commerce sales have gone up about 10% in the U.S., about 8% globally. And so, I think people are shopping around more. Inflation
Yeah.
certainly has had an impact on that. They are probably very price conscious and making sure, hey, if I can get a better deal for this T-shirt or whatever, pan, whatever they're buying, I'm not going to just buy because it's in my hand. I can have it delivered to me tomorrow with Amazon, or 20 units of these things from Timu in the next
Right.
week or something like that. It is interesting, and you and I talked about our own habits also, right? And you express how your family utilizes Uber Eats probably more than it should. I was
Yep.
recently at a bagel shop and waiting for my bagels a couple of weeks ago on a Sunday morning, and it was me sitting in there, kind of waiting for my bagels to be ready, and then about 7, 8 DoorDash people that walked in the span of maybe 15 minutes, just grabbing bags of bagels. So not even bagels are safe these days from e-commerce, and I would argue DoorDash is probably counted as e-commerce, which
Oh,
is which is
sure.
which is interesting, right?
And I mean, we even see it in the retail sphere where retailers, not necessarily Amazon, let's use, I don't know, Nordstrom's had, historically fabulous policies. So let's not use them, but
Yep.
clothing retailer X, pretty much all of them now will offer free shipping, free returns,
Yep.
will even pay for the return shipping. In fact, we'll send you a prepaid label just in case.
Yeah.
And all of this is to try to kind of be their own mini Amazon if you have some brand loyalty, right? If you don't want the knockoff brand you've never heard of version of whatever
Yeah.
the heck it is you're shopping for. But I mean the app thing, it's a bit trite,
Yeah.
but yes, we do everything from our phones. And I can't remember the last time I was at a store to try on an article of clothing. I couldn't tell you. It was probably
Yeah,
pre-COVID.
you're right. You're right. Yeah. It's a rare occurrence, and maybe it's our age, Elliot. I don't know. Maybe we're
Maybe.
sort of kidding ourselves.
Yeah, maybe.
We're down to the three stores that work for us, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that the
We're
size
basically
works.
spending all of our money there. So Elliot, as we kind of wrap up our conversation, our kind of final little segment of our show is exploring sort of what's on your mind in terms of things happening around the industry. This week, we're going to explore your mind. So tell us a bit of something that's kind of been on your mind recently, and something that you feel the audience should be aware of.
Yeah, so within real estate, there's obviously tons of different sectors and parts of the business, and I am a self-proclaimed capital markets person. I like investment much more than leasing. I love capital markets, debt, all that stuff. Find it very fascinating. And one of the big stories this last week has been, and we can use Willis Tower as kind of a corollary here that I mentioned earlier, has been CMBS. And the fact that it is expected to reach record highs. In fact, 24 was 115 billion was the issuance, which is 150% over 23. So the private investment market is returning to real estate. Now, the issue with this and why I think it's so important to focus on is the very nature that it is a double edged sword. It is not just good, it is not just bad. Like most things in life, we want to draw blacks and whites, but it's always gray. And for CMBS, it's a great sign that private investors are interested again in putting down capital on high quality assets. But CMBS is typically a direct inverse relationship to conventional banks being involved in the industry. So, by its very definition, when mortgage backed securities go up, it's because traditional lending is not.
Yep.
So, it's not just a good thing for our industry. It also still illustrates, frankly, that we have a bit of a problem.
What's interesting about this is, you're saying it's sort of a gray area. There are some people in the industry who, absolutely think it's sort of a red flag, that this part of the industry, continues to grow. I think we're faced with a couple of challenging circumstances. One is that debt is really difficult to get.
Right.
And anecdotally, and both from just seeing kind of reports, it seems that a lot of the lenders, if they're looking for refinancing, they're also looking for you to put down some more money. The terms are harder, more sort of difficult to swallow in general. And so, alternatives will appear because people may feel desperate and feel like, hey, if I can sort of, avoid this for the next couple of years, this is what we'll do. Um, it is an interesting kind of happening. Are you seeing anything specifically evolve there that either is worrisome or not worrisome?
I don't know if I'd go as far as worrisome, but what I think it really does is actually something that we're probably 2 years late on, which I would call a recalibration. One of the biggest issues in this past cycle, down cycle of real estate relative to, let's say, the GFC, is that valuation hasn't moved a whole heck of a lot. And that's a problem. And we're seeing in practice, of course, valuation has moved dramatically. People buying office buildings for 30 cents on the dollar.
Right.
But in the tax records, in the actual sort of capital A appraisal, the valuations haven't moved that much. But as we see this CMBS issuance go up, it's going to reassess property values by the very nature because it's against valuation. I mean, that CMBS is hedged against the value of the asset. So appraisal is going to have to take place, and I think we're going to start to see things be called worth what they're actually worth. So
Is that a bad thing, Elliot?
no, no, it's a great thing and it's long overdue. And I think it's going to start the process of a correction that, frankly, probably should have taken a couple, probably should have started a couple of years ago. But we talk about the extend and pretend thing again.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, there's a lot that goes into CMBS. It's not, like I said, gray. Um, but, rising interest rates, valuation completely disconnected from reality, all these things have basically put transactions to zero, more or less. I mean, obviously things
Yeah.
trade, but at a fractional percentage over the last couple of years. And we blame it on a lot of things. We just talked about blaming the retail industry. We blame politics. We blame whoever the current president is. We blame any number of things. We blame hybrid work. We blame whatever we can. None of that stuff matters if something that's worth $3 costs 10. None of it. It's all
Right.
window dressing if our valuation is off. But I was talking to an economist actually just this morning, and he told me something very interesting. One of the big topics around CMBS is, of course, special servicing, right? Distressed,
Yep.
delinquent, and dealing with that. That's one of the huge issues surrounding CMBS. So in January, multifamily special servicing rate went down for the first time in 5 months, which is great because typically that rate rises when more loans are in distress or potentially going to default. So therefore, there's a feeling that less multifamilies classically has a lot of CMBS and a lot of issues there. Um, Loans are not in danger of defaulting at the same volume that they have been over the last 5 months. But what the economist told me is, going back to the appraisals thing, sometimes the appraisals are just enough to keep a property out of special servicing. And it's playing the game, and that actually could produce a little bit of a scandal in the coming year, I think.
Interesting. Interesting. So we're here predicting that we're going to see some funny business going on over the next couple of years as some of these things unfold.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, the appetite in the business community to get things going is massive. We have
Yep.
talked about
Yep.
everyone has talked about the dry powder thing for 2 years now. And at some point, it has to come off the sidelines. And I think CMBS is just another data point in what is happening here.
But however, you're not seeing this as a systemic thing. This is more you're kind of on a case by case basis, right?
Yeah, because CMBS, by and large, these loans are for quality and performing assets. So when people hear mortgage backed securities that aren't in commercial real estate, they immediately associate it with subprime, right? They associate it with the GFC, they associate it with residential. It's not the same in commercial. Commercial real estate, it's really tied to the valuation, and it's not about necessarily the person, right? It's not humans, it's entities. So it's considered a relatively safe investment. So that means if investors are coming off the sidelines and putting private capital into real estate, they see upside. It's that simple.
Yeah, maybe I will be a bit of a contrarian, Elliot, and just to say that a lot of WeWork operations were considered safe bets
That's true.
for a very long time until they weren't. So it is interesting. I mean, I am curious, and maybe we should bring somebody who's an expert in kind of CMBS to sort of
Yeah.
talk to us about this a bit. It is an interesting evolution. I think it's a reaction to the realities of the market,
Yep.
and CMBS is as a vehicle is not going to go away.
Sure.
There is possibly some pending deregulation in the financial services industry with the new administration.
Sure.
If we can remember, that's what happened right before GFC. A lot of deregulation in the financial services industry, which kind of swung the pendulum in a certain direction that didn't necessarily benefit a lot of people.
Yep.
So, I think what you're saying, kind of, calling out, might be one of the variables that, we'll have to address at some point. I would argue it might be a little bit too early at this point to sort of make specific conclusions about
Yeah.
where it's heading. But I think you're absolutely right. I mean, if this is kind of where we're walking into something that might impact the market, in quite significant ways. So something to watch out for sure.
Yeah. And another thing to know about CMBS, one of the big, I don't want to say problems, challenges is probably a better word, of CMBS is getting your money out is
Yep.
pulling teeth. So, I mean, the prepayment penalties are massive. So, I have sort of, he's obviously a brilliant man, and I say this tongue in cheek, but I've sort of made fun of John Gray a little bit over the last 6 months in my head, which is like, wait, so now we're at the bottom. 2 months later, no, 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 I wasn't right. Now we're at the bottom.
Right.
3 months later, no, 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 no. Now we're at the bottom. And of course, that's just his business, right? He wants to tell people things are getting better. Since CMBS has a longer threshold and prepayment or getting out early is so hard, maybe that does suggest we are somewhere closer to or at the bottom because investors are saying, well, let me get in now because the
Yeah.
price is not
Yeah.
going to be any better tomorrow. In fact, it's going to be worse. Maybe.
That's an interesting observation, Elliot. And anecdotally, I've heard a couple people in the industry who know what they're talking about. Are basically the comments were along the lines of like Q4 of 24, Q1 of 25. We're probably going to look back at this period, 2-3 years from now, and say that was the bottom, right? So it is interesting that you're observing some of that occurring on the CMBS side. So well, wonderful. We've wasted another 30 minutes of everybody's lives, Elliot. What do you think about that?
Honestly, I have no idea why anyone would want to listen to 5 minutes of me. So I appreciate anyone that gave 30 minutes.
Well, if you are hearing this, you have successfully waited for a very good interview, which I think will be a lot more interesting than some of our babble here that we've just succumbed you to. But again, the interview upcoming now is with Andrew Thomas, the CEO of Downtown Santa Monica Inc. Um, he comes from the private practice, went into some of the public stuff that he's doing now, went out of it, went back. Interesting story of sort of how he's kind of emerged back to lead this organization, and very interesting discussion about what downtown Santa Monica is trying to accomplish in its future. So I'll kick us off there. Elliot, always great to see you, and we'll look forward to our conversation again next week.
Yes, sir. Likewise.
All right, Andrew, good afternoon. How's it going?
It's going great, Vlad. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Where do we find you today? Where are you?
I am in downtown Santa Monica here in Los Angeles County in the beautiful state of California. A little smoky now, but air quality is improving rapidly, and we're hoping to get people back outside and active as much as they can, are able, and feel comfortable doing.
Right. Yeah. And we'll get into that a little bit during our conversation. But what I want to do initially is give you an opportunity to sort of introduce yourself to our audience, say a few words, a little bit about sort of what you do and, where you do it and how you do it kind of deal. And then I'd love to jump into, further conversation about the Santa Monica, Downtown Santa Monica Association, obviously.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, again, Andrew Thomas, I'm the CEO of Downtown Santa Monica Inc. What we are is a nonprofit organization that administers the public space in downtown Santa Monica in partnership with the city of Santa Monica. And we do so representing our stakeholders here downtown, which are commercial property owners, business interests, but also users of our downtown place. I've been with Downtown Santa Monica Inc. now for north of 13 non-consecutive years. So I was here for 10 years as the director of operations, left to a different district, worked there for 11 years, and came back here to be the CEO back in September of 2022.
Yeah, and you've done some other work also. You've worked in the private sector also. I'm curious, a bit about sort of your path and kind of how all that has helped you in your role today. Just kind of some feedback that you feel would be interesting for kind of folks trying to learn more about your organization and also kind of your sort of path into this role.
Sure. Well, I sort of fell into it. I guess I started in the private sector, working for a startup company that specialized in e-commerce, and we were in San Francisco. I worked there for a little over 3 years, working in operations. So I was really managing private space for a company that grew very rapidly, to where we had one location in San Francisco to where we had multiple locations across the country. So I was probably way too young to have the job that I did. But that was probably true of a lot of people in that company. So I was able to learn, and I had to learn quickly, just what it took to be nimble, be creative, for a company that was really growing rapidly and expanding, quickly into different spaces and different markets. I met my wife while in the Bay Area, but she was actually here in Los Angeles getting her master's degree at USC. We thought a lot about where we wanted to settle. After about a year of sort of long distance relationship thing, I told her I was tired of being cold. So that meant leaving San Francisco, which I loved and still love to this day, moving to Los Angeles. So stayed working with that company for about a year. Really got tired of all the travel. It was very, very, very draining. And then I heard about an opportunity managing operations for an organization that manages public space. And that organization was the Bayside District Corporation, which evolved to become Downtown Santa Monica Inc.
Excellent. I think it's worthwhile giving a little bit of a primer in terms of sort of what downtown associations typically do. I think you and I know that, but I think for some of our listeners, it's important to also highlight how prevalent they are through most cities, I think, in this country. But maybe give us a bit of a sort of overview of what a typical downtown association does, and then maybe a little bit how that distinguishes you guys from the rest of that group.
Yeah, sure. Well, as you mentioned, there are many organizations that have frameworks similar to ours. We are what's known as a property based assessment district. So essentially, if you own property within a geographic boundary, you pay a percentage, really an assessment that's based on a matrix which differs from district to district. But that calculus is for us is the square footage of your parcel, or the square footage of your building, whichever is greater. But when I was working for the Westwood Business Improvement District, there it was a combination of the frontage of your space plus the building square footage plus the partial square footage. So Different combinations work in different places, but ultimately it's a dollar amount that's set by and paid for when you pay your property taxes. So there's no getting around it. It's not a voluntary assessment. If you're within that geographical area that's paying, then you're paying that assessment to the organization, which is then really leaning in and providing services that I believe are greatly beneficial to folks. And I think just the prevalence and popularity of organizations like ours backs that up. There are organizations that are membership based or volunteer based, or some that receive their funding based on sales taxes. So it really varies. I have to say, I like our model because it's consistent and allows you to better budget as opposed to having something that might be fluid like sales taxes or a volunteer assessment. Which if businesses are feeling generous and they're in a good position, then they're certainly more able to pay than if not. But going on the property tax bills for our property owners has worked for our organizations and plenty like ours. And I think organizations have really become so much more prevalent because of the need. And as cities have moved out of providing services in the public right of way, the private sector has had to step in. And a lot of
Right.
places, a lot of cities, city staff is not trimming the trees or emptying trash cans or pressure washing or doing marketing for their downtown. They can't afford to do that any longer. So the private industry has stepped in partnership with these cities to provide these services, and I think they're working. And I think the sort of the growth of this industry proves that.
And Andrew, you said that your funding comes from the property taxes. Obviously, the valuations over the last couple of years have been interesting to say the least. Has that been an impact to you guys? And to what degree?
Yeah, I'd say yes and no. I'd say on the no side is the assessment set. So for our district, it's the size of your parcel or the size of your property, and that's not going to change. Although we do have a number of properties that are under development now that are being assessed at the parcel value, and that assessment will go up once they get their certificate of occupancy and are open for business or residents or what have you. And then all of a sudden the square footage of the building will become greater than the parcel and the assessment will go up. I'd say where we're seeing the biggest impact is that for properties that don't have tenants, maybe they have occupancy, maybe it's vacancy, maybe they have chronic vacancy. It's certainly more of a struggle to pay the assessment if you don't have a partner with
Sure.
a business as a tenant. So organizations like ours, we have the authority per our management district plans, which is essentially our constitution, that goes out to a ballot. So folks who, when they establish an organization like ours, it does go out to vote. And if it passes, then basically here are your set of rules. And within those rules, an elected board of directors is authorized to represent your greater community and make the decision about raising assessments anywhere from 0 to 5% a year in our case.
Yeah.
So our board has determined not to raise assessments for the last 4 years. So we've had to really tighten our belts, just like a lot of our businesses have that have been struggling in these changing times. So it has affected us, but we've affected ourselves by choice in terms
Yeah.
of trying to be mindful of what our business community is going through.
Yeah, makes sense. And if you think of some of the milestones since the formation of the association, what would be some things that you would highlight?
Yeah, well, there's been a lot. I'd say for one, when we started, when the Bayside District Corporation was formed back in the late '80s, we were funded by a grant from the city to provide marketing services to ensure that there were events happening in our downtown space, and then to provide advocacy and representation for our business community. And we had some operations money as well, but nothing like we do now. In 2008 is when the assessment district passed that ballot vote, and all of a sudden our budget grew by, at that time I think it was almost 4 times what our budget had been. We were able to launch a lot of clean and safe services that supplemented services that were existing here. I think it upped our ability to provide marketing, communications, events. We got into social media when that blew up. So we've grown a lot. But I would say the initial milestone is the passage of the the property based assessment district that really allowed us to take steps to the next level. And since then, I think that we've had, and this isn't just me. This is all the people who have worked here, in particular my predecessor who was here for a long time before I started. Um, there's always been a certain creativity, a nimbleness, innovation that has come out of this organization where we do a lot of things here first that then move on to other districts. And I'd say that's a credit to us, it's a credit to our board, but also a credit to the city of Santa Monica that is very open to our suggestions. So we have license agreements with the city of Santa Monica to have events and activations in space, different revenue sharing models with the city of Santa Monica that gives us additional funding to provide services for our downtown. I feel like we're lockstep in a lot of our PR efforts and marketing and promotion for the city and other partners here in downtown. So I think downtown Santa Monica is really, as an organization, has really set a very high bar and a standard for other organizations to follow. And it's always gives me great pleasure to see when programs that we've instituted here all of a sudden start in other places.
Yeah.
So we try to continue setting the trends here and the standards, but while also learning from our peers as well.
Have you grown as your staff? Have you grown the membership? I'm sure yes to both, but curious about that as well.
Yeah, well, we're technically not is legally not a membership organization because
Right, right.
if you're here, you're in our geographic area, then you're paying your assessment, and you're in whether you like it or not. Although most people do like it. Um, as an organization, we had a very large staff. I think all things considered, and when COVID hit, in addition to the impact it had on our business community, had a big effect on our organization as well. And probably from the period of when COVID hit, in early 2020 all the way until, I should say, it was January of 2022 when my predecessor left to go pursue another opportunity. We lost a lot of staff. We lost board members. It hurt our ability to manage our enterprise projects, which bring in a lot of funding to us. So when I came on, there was probably about an 8 or 9 month period of time where there was it's really a leadership vacuum. There was nobody sitting in this chair, and so our board, ably, stepped up as great volunteers do, and did assume a lot of the leadership role. But it's not the same as having a full time CEO. So one of the things I had to do very quickly when I started was really rebuild the organization, hire, welcome our new board members, get them acclimated, develop an understanding between all of us of how we're going to work together, really solidify the mission, all of those things so we could start taking next steps.
You mentioned COVID, and obviously, we are recording this at the end of January, so we're kind of in the middle of what's affecting the Los Angeles region with the wildfires. There is a number of things that you guys, as an organization, have done to kind of increase your resiliency and enable faster recovery. I'm curious about both of those, but maybe let's talk about some of the sort of efforts kind of done as a result of what happened with COVID initially, because I think there's some interesting stories there. And then maybe let's also chat a little bit about what's going on next door to Santa Monica and all this terrible tragedy that we've experienced here at the start of 2025.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, regarding COVID and what our organization did and what organizations like ours did, and I think are still doing in a lot of levels, one of the things that I take a lot of pride in is, I really sort of cut my teeth in the private sector, again, with a startup that we were scraping by to get budget and figure out how we were going to last a week, a month, a year before we eventually grew to a pretty large company. But it gave me a deep appreciation for really innovation, creative thinking, the ability to be nimble, flexible, and that really helped, I think, the organization here, but also organizations throughout the industry that work with bureaucracies that are intentionally built to be cumbersome, and have checks and balances. So what happened here in Santa Monica and in other communities, I think there's a big push to help our businesses develop an outside presence. I think in understanding that our restaurants were in deep trouble, so how could we move as much of their business outdoors where people were more comfortable sitting as possible. I think one of the great things our former mayor here in Los Angeles said when expanding the outdoor dining programs throughout the city. And we're in Santa Monica is not. We have our own separate system. We're not in Los Angeles, but I was working in Los Angeles at the time. The mayor said, when your official motto is or unofficial motto is 72 degrees and sunny, we really should be moving outside and making this permit process easier for our restaurants. So it's something that Santa Monica took advantage of. A lot of our restaurants moved outside, and being able to add to their seating inventory, really gave them a chance to compete and in some cases really excel. We have restaurants here on the Third Street Promenade, which is a closed off street. To no vehicular traffic is allowed; it's all pedestrian. We had a number of businesses that really did quite well because they were able to move outdoors, double in some cases their seating inventory, give people options when they were just desperate to get outside and mingle and be together. So that was some of the help for our restaurant community. I'd say other assistance was with zoning, the process to start a business. I think all communities, uh, and certainly within our region here in Los Angeles, once COVID hit and a number of businesses were really sort of immediately wiped out or rethought their strategies and closed down and became more online focused. I think for all of us, there became a race for entrepreneurs and how are we going to get them invested here in our city. So Santa Monica, I think, has been a leader in this, in that we've been able to change zoning ordinances. There's no conditional, really, you don't need a conditional use permit for just about anything these days, which has made a process that is, to sell alcohol, for example, which is expensive, timely, or it takes a lot of time, unpredictable. It's made that very predictable and save people 8 months and a fortune, to be able to open a bar or a restaurant or something like that. So the city stepped up really under a lot of, with cooperation and partnership from the Business Improvement District to help businesses open, which I think gave people comfort when they went looking for funding to be able to open. And there's more things that have happened with zoning and what you can build in terms of housing and hospitality. We're seeing a big boom in our hotel sector. So the process for opening a business or developing a property changed pretty dramatically in a very short time here in Santa Monica. It is not in other places. In other places, it is the same. Los Angeles went through a process where they were developing their quote unquote emergency ordinance. It took a year and a half before it passed. Where in Santa Monica, I think it was within the first month they had
Yeah.
new ordinances on the table. Sort of shifting to your question about the fires and some of the recent
Yeah.
struggles here. I mean, it's been so impactful for our community, and we are lucky here in Santa Monica. We haven't been impacted by fire, by physical damage, but the economic impact for our downtown will really remain. The damage remains to be seen. But I can tell you, as somebody who's here every day, walking the streets, I don't see the same people. Some of the vehicular traffic is coming back, and I know that from my commute back and forth to my home. But in terms of what we're seeing on the streets, people populating businesses, shopping, going to restaurants, that's down. The areas of the Pacific Palisades fire, that's immediately north of us. So we lost a lot of our customer base and people that spend a lot of time in Santa Monica as users, shoppers, diners, theater goers, anything like that. Santa Monica itself had a number of areas evacuated by order, and then there were a number of areas that were under evacuation warnings. So it added a lot of tension here in the community,
Sure.
and people
Yep.
just didn't feel like going out. And gosh, probably the first week or week and a half, coming into work, it felt like COVID times. I mean, there was literally nobody on the road. Our organization responded in a number of ways. I think immediately and on the ground, we upped our cleaning efforts, get rid of downed limbs and debris because the winds were very intense. We expanded the hours of operation for our security program, so that was 24/7, and that was really to have more eyes and ears on the ground, assist with the police, ensure that there was no looting during these times where nobody was out and a lot of businesses were closed. And we changed all of our marketing efforts to really amplify what the city was doing in terms of messaging, what the county was doing in terms of messaging. And then I've been really pushing out opportunities for people to volunteer, to donate, different programs for businesses that they might be able to take advantage of for assistance. So we'll we're keeping an eye on it. The Palisades fire is still not 100% contained.
Right.
Um, the freeway exits, to our district are still closed. So we're still in the middle of it. So I'm really hopeful that we can soon shift from sort of crisis response to recovery response. But I feel confident that our local government, our organization, our board is all going to be on the same page and really lockstep and doing everything we can to help our business community.
Yeah. What does this do for your planning in terms of like, has the fire changed any of your, safety kind of, parameters? Has that impacted, things that you are thinking about going forward? I mean, I'm sure it has, and maybe we don't have enough time to go through all of those, but I am curious, obviously, maybe high level, what it means for an organization like yours.
Yeah, well, I'd say, immediately it's, delayed a number of projects and programs that we were looking to launch. Like we have a license agreement with the city of Santa Monica to activate a vacant lot, and we have an agreement with a company that's going to do, all sorts of, activations, pickleball, things like that there. And that's been delayed because, they need contractors to help build out the space. And, right now, you know, unfortunately, LA is probably a pretty good place to be a contractor. You're not going to lack for work for a pretty long time. So there's been delay there. We have programs and initiatives that we want to take on, and surveys that we want to send out to our people, but the time is just not right now, and it's unfortunate. We've been in the middle of a big economic development, public relations push because so much is happening in Santa Monica that's so positive. We want to be able to share it, but right now is really not the time to share that news. And that may not be where we are in 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, it may be that, a greater shift towards recovery reveals that the economic damage, put 20 businesses in our district under. So I think we really need to just do a, sort of wait and see, assess, what's going on in our community and go from there. But I think one thing I'm concerned about, when COVID happened, almost immediately there were opportunities for PPP loans and things to keep businesses afloat, keep them paying their employees, um, and that's not happening now. And it's tough to, I think, to quantify for an area like us that's really, we are an amenity for areas that were wiped out.
Right.
And understandably, I don't expect people to shed too many tears for us. Our businesses that weren't burned to the ground. And Santa Monica residents didn't lose their homes. So I think we need to be cognizant of that. But there is an impact, and I think we're only just, we will soon learn what that is.
Yeah. Shifting gears from this conversation towards something that you guys do, I think, really well. When you and I initially spoke about this conversation, one of the things that you highlighted was data collection and insights. You also use that as a way to kind of help you essentially make decisions around some innovation stuff, right? Including things like fast spacing, entertainment zones and things like that. Tell us a bit about that process and how that's kind of helped advance the association into some new areas that maybe you guys weren't doing a little while ago.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that we're completely reinventing the wheel. I think we're just a great aggregator of information that's extremely relevant to our community. So, we have memberships of Placer and CoStar and LoopNet, and we have access to information about how credit card use is in our downtown, and just the ability to be able to share that with our broker community who is out there on the front lines, really pushing the message about investing in downtown, opening your business in downtown. It's incredibly important to them. It helps our property owner community when they see our maps showing all the development that's upcoming in downtown Santa Monica. That they're probably looking at that, and I hope they're thinking, "Wow, there's a lot of people with a lot of money that are choosing Santa Monica, and I've really made the right investment, and I'm going to keep this up and maybe double down and reinvest in my current building or development or something like that." We look at pedestrian counts, and that drives a lot of our decision making on a very granular level. Where do we want to have our events? When do we want to have our events. Where are people parking? We have access to that information as well. How can we best drive people to those parking spaces, or can we change the pricing of parking that's a little further away, to make that more attractive and maybe open that up for employee parking or things like that. So I like to think, the truth will set you free, and daylight is, the best disinfectant, all those transparency things. But um, I always, one of my personal pet peeves when people just sort of let kind of emotions, or maybe a perception or overwhelming narrative really affect their judgment. I think that's irresponsible. I think we really need to use data and the facts on the ground to develop our policies and better understand what's happening in our downtown. And it's, I think, allowed us to make very convincing arguments to the city about making zoning changes, about us taking space, for license agreements and what type of uses we like to see brought in, and talking about public safety and cleanliness and these kind of things as well. So I like to be a data-driven organization, and I think that gives us all the evidence that we need to make the case for the change that we want to see.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about some of the innovation happening in terms of some, new retail concepts. I think you talked a little bit about, TikTok shop that opened up. TikTok is sort of in the news again, obviously, for
Yeah,
different reasons. But I am curious, some of that, which has, I think, kind of surprised you in terms of, what some folks are doing.
yeah. Yeah, Santa Monica has always been a great home for innovation. The city was one of the first to lay down, really intense, fiber with the bandwidth to be able to support um, big companies that were expanding rapidly, that were in, had an online space. And again, just I think its ability to be nimble in terms of changing zoning and allowing for different type of uses. We have a lot of creative office space here, which is very attractive to people in the tech sector, and I think that helps us attract innovation as well. The business innovation is really interesting. This outlandish, the TikTok store, I think is a really dramatic example of that, where it's sort of a split between this online retail space and a traditional brick and mortar space. And I go in there from time to time, and it's so remarkable to see all these different booths set up with, I think that they're really influencers in their own right, selling product, and they may have massive followings themselves. And these are companies that have hundreds of millions of dollars in sales internationally too. And here at a booth operating on the promenade, where where you can either buy their stuff online or come to the store. So I think that's really, really remarkable to see something like that take off. And I think that's just the beginning. I think this whole sort of QVC home shopping network kind of model that has an online space, I think has a lot of potential, and could be something that every retail store has in the
Sure.
future. I mean,
Yeah.
we've certainly seen, this sort of, people's desire for convenience in the food industry, where we have robots crawling all over the place downtown, or rolling all over the place, I should say, with people's DoorDash and whatever in it. And part of me always cringes when I see these little robots driving around, because that just means there are fewer people out on the streets here, and they're eating at home. When I'd really rather them come out to a restaurant here and walk by a store and maybe think, oh, I'll go in and buy something, or just experiencing the district and having more bodies out here. So sometimes the innovation, I think, has another sort of a side that we have not yet fully we can't fully grasp just what the
Right.
effects are at this time, because I like
Right.
to see more people out in the street, not less. We have a new fitness center that's going to be opening in the next week or so. That's all AI based and customizes your workouts. A16Z, which is a big venture capital firm that I think has a lot of tech investment, they just opened their headquarters here in downtown. We had a big tech week event 2 or 3 months ago out on the street, and lots of
This is
different.
the Andreessen Horowitz firm, essentially, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So there's been a lot of really cool things here happening. I think as we start to see a shift in what younger consumers want, shifting towards experiential type uses, maybe away from, I want to go to the big box retailer and spend all day. I think Santa Monica, I know Santa Monica is welcoming to all different kinds of uses. And I think just our position as being, just kind of a hip, cool place to be, I think really helps us. And we need to be ready to lean into these types of uses and be flexible with zoning. So we're not turning away businesses that could be really successful here. And the TikTok store, the Outlandish, is a great example of that. That model doesn't exist in a zoning code. You
Right.
had this, your city partners need to be flexible enough to understand what it is and allow it. Otherwise, you're stuck going in circles, and you're going to lose out in that race for entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Let's talk about what happens in your view, at least next 5-10 years. I know there's a refresh of the promenade, right? I mean, that's one of those big goals. But what are some other things on the horizon that Santa Monica has?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. For one, we're really fortunate that there's a tremendous amount of investment happening in downtown right now. So, over $1 billion in the hospitality industry with new hotels and remodeling of hotels. It just, I think, further strengthens Santa Monica's position as a leader in that industry. And, we have the Olympics coming, the World Cup, there'll be another Super Bowl here. I mean, these events aren't necessarily in Santa Monica, but people don't want to stay, maybe in Inglewood next to SoFi Stadium. They want to stay in Santa Monica where they can also go to the beach and have great restaurants. And nothing against Inglewood, it's great. I live really close to there. But Santa Monica is a leader in this industry for a reason. We have assets here that other places don't. Weather, the beach, the pier, great restaurants, all these things. So I think that type of investment certainly pays off, and I'm looking forward to those hotels opening soon. I think most of them will open prior to the Olympics.
Right.
We have 2,300 plus residential units that are either under construction, being built now, permitted or waiting permit approval. So we're going to see a huge influx in residential people here, which is great. It gives us a captive audience of people here who are going to be our regular consumers and at the coffee shops and at the gym and going to the TikTok store and all those kind of things. So that's really exciting. I think from an organizational standpoint, we need to really position ourselves where we can be welcoming to these business opportunities, welcoming to this kind of development, encouraging more of it so our downtown can continue to grow and continue to outpace other downtown communities that are really our competition, for the investment that we really want to see here. Also internally, organization, we need to ensure our footing as well. And organizations like ours, property-based assessment districts, have a set term, and our term expires in 2028. So we need to ensure that our stakeholders are fully supportive of what we are doing. They understand what we're doing. They believe in the mission, and they want to see it continue past 2028. So we'll have to go out to a reauthorization vote where our voters, our property owners, will determine whether the organization will continue. So very important that we stay on top of that. Otherwise, the loss here, I think, would be tremendous.
Right.
There's no organization equipped to really represent and speak for our business community like ours is, and that couldn't be more important than it is right now. I think the city of Santa Monica has had a change in its leadership on its city council. There were four new council members elected. Definitely a much younger group than the council members that left us. And they have a lot of very progressive ideas. I think it's important that they be great partners to downtown, so they understand the issues that we're facing, rely on our expertise as the custodians and stewards of downtown, while making the best possible policy decisions so we can grow. But ultimately, I think for organizations like ours, it's about how do we set a foundation for success, and that success comes from all sides. Whether it's you want to develop here, open a business here, you want to come down here and be a shopper, or just sit in the park. So that's making sure that we're a clean, safe, welcoming district for everyone.
Yeah. As we close our conversation, and you kind of take a personal reflection on sort of everything that's gone there. Tell me a little bit about how do you think the industry can help? How can the industry get involved? What would be some recommendations that you would want to see from people in and around Santa Monica that can really sort of help what you guys are doing to make it a long lasting um, change?
Yeah, I think there's nothing more important than engagement, and making sure that everybody is involved. and that can be painful, and sometimes it can make things a little bit slower. But ultimately, I think you have a better chance of succeeding and getting where you want to go if you have everybody at least acknowledging the process, if not supporting it. And hopefully, most people will, but there will always be some antagonists in the group that maybe are less supportive. But that doesn't mean that their opinion matters less or that they shouldn't be aware of what's going on. So I think when organizations run into obstacles is when they tend to skip those kinds of steps that I think are just so important to us. I mean, I'm incredibly proud of what we've built here in this organization in my 3 years back. Santa Monica is a really, I have a personal attachment here. My kids were born right down the street in the Santa Monica hospital. I spent 10 years here before I left to go run an organization, in Los Angeles. Being back here matters to me. When I came back and just seeing, just so few people in the office and just a lack of vibrancy and enthusiasm, on the streets and even in our office here, it felt like, boy, we really need to change direction quickly and get everybody on the same page and start building from within, but then pushing out to really create the type of inclusive environment where people feel valued and that their opinions matter and that they can see progress. So I think just from an industry perspective, really leaning into to meeting the needs of your stakeholders, not being afraid to let your city colleagues know what your positions are. I always say, you don't have, we're not, we don't have to like it, but here's where we stand on various issues that matter to us. And I think when your city partners know that, that your positions, really reflect, a betterment of the community, um, I think you can have better relationships and a greater chance towards success. And that requires a certain amount of buy-in, but I think that's all possible. And my favorite city partners are the ones, or municipal partners, I'd say, are the ones that understand that organizations like ours can be nimble and flexible in ways that they can't. And so when they contract with us to provide services, for example, or contract with us to bring activations to downtown or host events here. I mean, those are things that would take months, if not years, for the city to go through an RFP process, and maybe there's the council vote, it has to be vetted by this or that or whoever. But we can turn things around very, very quickly. And I think the more our city partners lean into what we're doing, the better off we all are.
Wonderful. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. Really appreciate it. Best of luck with rest of the year, and certainly hope that some of this craziness around the forest fires doesn't expand. And we wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. Been a pleasure chatting with you.